And today I'm going to give you hopefully some thoughts, some perspectives on my writing process and how I have used what I have done in the past with previous undergraduate students that I have worked with, and share with you some reasons why I really think that you should be thinking seriously about writing, getting into scientific writing, even if you are still an undergraduate student, why it's very, very relevant to you. Before we get into that though, let me explain a little bit, give you a little bit about myself. So I was born in Denmark, which explains the accent, possibly. But I have also lived and worked in 6 countries on 4 continents. So all the white dots represent the countries that I have lived and worked in. And the red dots is where I have spent multiple months. And we're talking not just sort of visiting for half a month or something, no, spent significant amount of time. So I'm standing before you as somebody who has a lot of international experience. So I kind of know a little bit about other cultures. I know what it's like in academia and also held professional positions. So I know about why writing is important in industry. So that is so my perspective is broad. There's a lot of dimensions to me talking to you about scientific writing. And I have been writing for a long time. So I'm from Denmark. I had a book published back in 1995. So 30 years ago was when I had the only book I've ever published. I've produced book chapters and whatnot. But this was about rainforest and farmers in Brazil and how beekeeping could be used as a vehicle to drive sustainable development, bæredygtig udvikling. But since then, I have been engaged in research in a whole bunch of areas. So I have published on coffee beans, I have published on seed germination, on phone apps, on use of cold plasma, which is the newest that we are working on. I work with ponies and horses and their behavior. So this is giving you a little bit of an idea of how broad, how much experience I have from all these different areas. And this is important because it should show you that when you get involved in scientific writing, you can get pulled into many different areas. It's kind of like a base. It's like a language or a philosophy. When you understand the principles of science and you become better and better at writing, you can make yourself valuable to a lot of different people. And a lot of people are looking for, a lot of scientists that run labs like myself, we are looking for people that can help carry that load, help carrying because getting the data produced, as difficult and challenging it is to get the money and actually develop the experimental designs and collect the data and get them repeated, as difficult as that is, the real work actually starts after that, which is the writing process. So it's very, very important to become good at first of all, understanding what scientific writing is all about, and also having an idea of how to tackle it, how to get involved in it at an early stage in your career. So who can publish a peer-reviewed article? Well, that's a fair question. And by the way, you are more than welcome to interject, to ask questions as we go along here. So any thoughts? Who can publish a peer-reviewed article? Is that only an elite group or can everybody do that? Any thoughts? Pretty much anyone. Here's an example, okay? This is so this was published in 2010, so a while ago. Here's the catch with this. These were primary school students. These were 10 and 11-year-olds. So Biology Letters is a very good journal, okay? So they are authors on an article in Biology Letters, okay? And they produced a paper on bees and bee foraging and individuality of bees. So if you're a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, and have a very smart teacher, you can actually publish in Biology Letters, okay? If you're a high school student, there is actually journals designated to scientific writing. I don't know why. I was never informed about this kind of stuff when I went in high school, but this is actually an established journal. And those, if you look this journal up, those are pretty decent papers. So this process can be started very, very early. Very, very important to know, okay? And why should we get involved in this? Why are we sitting here today? So there's a reason why you're here, and there's a reason why I'm standing here. Well, let's try to, and maybe I can ask you first. Why would you say that it would be valuable to get involved in scientific writing? What comes to mind? Yeah?
Graduate school application.
Graduate, so how would that benefit your graduate school application, do you think?
To show professors that we are interested in research and we have questions we want answered.
Absolutely. You are dedicated, you are familiar with the process, you've overcome lots of the hurdles, you know the nuts and bolts of getting this process. If you could apply to grad school and already have something published, I can guarantee you that you would be in a very elite class. And I am trying to make that class less elite. I'm trying to make that more common for people to think about. But it actually, there's more to it, okay? So let's start with the extremely important fact here, which is that publications are the currency of academia. If you want to spend time in academia, this is how you get somebody. This is how you get somebody's attention. This is the currency we all work on. This is how you may not think that you have a lot to offer, but if you can offer a co-authorship to somebody, they will get interested, okay? So having something planned out, showing that you're capable, you can actually use that as leverage. You can use that to say, why don't you take me on as a grad student, because I'm working on this, we could finish this up, you could help me finish this up. So you could do 85% of the work, silver plated to the person, they sign, and then there's your graduate application, they sign that, boom, okay? Completely doable. So definitely you can get internships, right? You can get, there are competitions on campus, there are competitions elsewhere, you can get recognitions, scholarships, awards. GPA is great and all that stuff, but what if you have published something? That's gonna set you aside, for sure. And the graduate school, of course, is the key one, but I wanna say even more, it's not just the publication, it is, you could be, and I do this with some of my students, I engage with them before they join my lab, and we actually establish a relationship. So if I'm working with Quinn, for instance, right? And we're writing together, well, I get to know his writing style. He gets to know my revision styles. And if we, for whatever reason, are incompatible, if I realize this is not working, or he's like, I don't like what he's saying, I don't agree with it, we can walk away and then end of story, and he can go and find some other lab to work in. So this is a way to truly work with a prospective mentor, prospective supervisor, is figuring out, can we work, am I getting the attention that I'm looking for? Is this really giving me the feedback? Is this moving it forward? Is this person helping me out in the process? So you get that done, and then on top of that, it could potentially be what you're writing on could already be the literature review in your thesis. So if you're doing a master's program where you have 2 years or 3 years potentially, you could be doing that even before you start. What would be the advantages of that? You would know all the literature. You would already know your professor. You would have developed a working relationship. And because you know all the literature, you would also know how to set up your experiments. You would know how other people have set up their experiments. You would learn so much about the knowledge gap that exists, and therefore where you can jump in and provide something that can be unique and much more publishable. So there's a lot of reasons why you are here today. So I'm so glad you're here. And I hope you can take something away from what I'm sharing with you today. So it's not just high school, it's not just primary school students who publish. This is an undergraduate student, Beta. She was in my class. We ended up writing a paper together. She was doing a practicum. This was published in Methods in Ecology and Evolution, which is a very, very good journal. This was just going to be a practicum. It ended up being a full review about using sound as a way to quantify health in terrestrial ecosystems. Incredible. Completed undergraduate student. Derek at the time was an undergraduate student with me in my lab. We also wrote a review article about insects and how they are typically distributed along edges of environments. So they have this edge bias in their spatial distribution. So that has very huge implications for how we sample them, where we should expect them to be, and how we can manipulate, use that to our advantage. So we published on that. So that's another example. So he was an undergraduate student in my class, and he was in End 110, and there are actually 2 people from that class right here with us today. And here is the one that we're going to come back to this. So this was a mini review published about 10 years ago by Katrina. This was when I was in University of Western Australia in Perth. So we'll come back to this. So this is a mini review. Now, let me ask you this. Who has heard of a mini review? Do you have any idea? You have heard a little bit about it. So what would you say? Maybe it gives it away, but what would you say characterizes a mini review?
The amount of, it's like a literature review, reviewing a certain amount, like a subset of the articles.
Absolutely, yeah. So these 2 articles were also review articles, but they were much bigger. There were many more references. Mini review can be a very small area, a small targeted area where you have some specific questions that you revise and you find literature about, and then you write a little story about that. And we can see, if we look in the literature, in the peer-reviewed article literature, we can see that most of the articles being published are straight up research articles where there are methods, there are some experiments, some of this going on. And of course there are review articles, which are these bigger, comprehensive analyses, meta-analyses of existing data. So this would be the secondary research publications. But then we have these newer categories that are called commentaries, opinion articles, and mini reviews. And those are the ones that I'm talking about. So not a lot, not very big, maybe somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 words. 5 to 10 sections, a couple of illustrations, and some references. Look at that. You got a summer break. You got 3 months, okay? 120, you got 90 days. How long does it take you to write 3,000 words? Okay? Completely doable. Completely doable. Okay? If you're dedicated, if you know how to exercise for a marathon or learn how to play the tuba or learn a language or something, if you have any of those experiences and that level of dedication, this is completely doable. Setting up a plan. Okay? The question is how to find a topic and then get started, get sort of the wheels spinning. So the wheels spinning, it starts with an idea. We gotta somehow get ourselves inspired. We somehow have to get hit in the head by an apple or something to, wait a minute, that was kind of interesting. And then that has to lead into some questions. So we get this initial, whoa, wake-up call here. And then we formulate that into some questions that we might have. And then we start looking into a body of literature. So what is actually known, and the knowledge gap, what is actually not known? What do we have already, and what do we need to complement here? Can we fit ourselves in? Where are the places that we can potentially have some contributions? And when we have followed that, we can create our narrative. We can come up with the story that we think is going to be compelling and worthy of publication somewhere. And the 3 sort of bullets or parts that I want to talk about specifically is the title, the focus, how we get the focus right, and then the sequences, the paragraphs, the sections that are going in to be sort of the body text that we are going to be filling out, and how we can how we can create that in a way so that it flows, so that it's logic, so that it's consistent, so that it follows the basic rules of how scientific writing is being delivered. So where do I get my ideas from? Where should you be seeking information? What should you be doing as part of preparing you for this process? Well, I definitely look into scientific journals, follow that. Something like Science News, which I have a subscription of. It's a very light, but gives you a lot of feedback, a lot of ideas to what is current in science. It's kind of like a lightweight of nature or science. Very, very useful. So if you're looking for somebody for Christmas or something, or give you a birthday present, maybe they could give you a subscription to this journal, or you can buy it yourself. It's not that expensive. But keep yourself, if you're interested in this, you have to have the initial ideas. You have to get inspired somewhere. Another place to go is like Science Friday on National Public Radio, on NPR. Fabulous, absolutely fabulous. So often I'm sitting in the car or listening to it and it's just like, whoa, it blows your mind. They tell you very, very cool stories. Science podcasts. TED Talks is another great source of information where you can go out and get yourself inspired, see how what's going on, right? So, and of course, so you're here today. You are on a campus, so you should also set aside maybe figuring out over in plant sciences, in other departments, in bioag and in agriculture and in different engineering programs or whatnot. When do they have seminar series? What is going on? If you're interested in science, in writing, you have to get an idea. So that has to come from somewhere. So you have to actively seek that out somehow. Talk with people, get into seminar rooms, podcasts, wherever you get your feed from, wherever you get your inspiration from. That's very, very critical. Because those ideas are not going to come from nowhere. They have to be sought in some way. So this is the first step, right? So you now have this idea or this initial seed that you want to take care of. You want to nurture it. You want to take it further. And for instance, it could be, so this I heard on Science Friday the other day, which is, so why does polar fur not freeze? Right? Somebody thought of that and had that, was like, wait a minute, why is that actually? And then they tested it experimentally and found out why that actually happens. Why it is that way. So animals use tools. How widespread is it? So birds use sticks and otters use rocks. And so these are topics that could potentially lead to a mini review. These are topics that could potentially be somewhere in here. There's a story that needs to be told. You just have to find out what that narrative is. What is the angle that has not been addressed, right? So do animals play? Well, very recently, there was some of the cutest YouTube videos out there are of bumblebees playing around with balls, right? By the way, how do we define playing? Have you thought of that? What is play defined as?
Maybe it's like animal or plant behavior, not for the resource.
Not for the resource. So you're definitely along. So the definition I've heard, which I find very, very compelling, is it is when an animal does something that is not strictly related to the main purposes of its life, meaning feeding or mating or protection from predators. So it's a active use of time and resources without it actually necessarily having an initial purpose. When you're just doing it for the heck of it, that's what playing is. Well, it turns out bees are doing that, okay? And they found out in this study of bees that it was actually mainly young bees. So they're learning, they're playing with balls, they're strengthening their muscles, they're learning about balance, because that's like actually pollinating and seeking food in a flower that is moving around. So it's not that it doesn't serve a purpose, playing is not waste of time, but it's not directly related to mating or to feeding or to protection against predators. And can plants respond to sound? It turns out they can. And there are some incredible videos and studies out there where people have actually recorded sound of a gnawing, of a chewing caterpillar, amplified that signal, played it to an Arabidopsis plant, and demonstrated that it upregulates its defense-inducible defense compounds, okay? But see, these are just completely different, and some of them are related to behavior, some of them are related to plants, some are behavior. It's this kind of stuff, these kinds of ideas that if you are an active citizen, if you are actively seeking out information in your daily world, if you're hungry for a story, this is what you should be listening for, trying to figure out, trying to catch, and then turn into a story, figuring out how can I package this? And you can even, at that point, you can actually go to your graduate advisor and say, I heard this podcast, okay, and it blew my pants off. It was about this and this and this, and I think there's a story to be told about this. What do you think? See, now you're not coming, hey, can I be a grad student in your program? Those are two completely different ways of interacting with the same person, right? The latter one is probably not going to get you a lot of attention, but if you come showing dedication, showing interest like that, you're going to get a coffee, right? You're going to get a lunch or something. This is going to lead to something. So these are the reasons why you really need to be curious and how you can use what is being published out there as inspiration, or what you see on TED Talks or wherever you get your information from. So then you get into the knowledge gap and the body of knowledge. So now you've sort of refined you have the initial idea. You now also have an idea of what are the questions that you are really interested in pursuing. And now you need to dig into the literature. So now you need to start spending time on the computer. You need to start going into Google Scholar and start looking at the published body of literature. Read them, so you learn a lot in that process, seeing different reading styles, seeing different ways of publishing figures and tables, how they are presented, how citations are being used. And in the process, you also hopefully learn to use a citation management software. And that's, so if somebody's already paying you a subscription for Science News or something equivalent, if they're already paying you that, the next person they should give you is an EndNote or some license to one of these software packages. And how many of you are at this moment using citation management software? We got a couple here, but see, this is an absolute must, okay? 100% a must. Some of them are free, like BibTeX and Zotero, they're free, okay? You absolutely need to watch videos on doing this, because this is saving you a ton of time and makes your writing so much more elegant if you are using a... Would you agree, guys? Yeah. And so using it is learning how to use it. It takes time to set it up. It's not that difficult to learn. I know the library is also offering courses or whatnot. I think it's overrated. I think it's so easy. You can just figure it out yourself. With a couple of YouTube videos, you're good to go. And then it allows you from Google directly to import the references into your own database. And now you can just start populating them into what you're writing automatically. So this makes the writing, and if you have to publish into one journal, you would use one style, and if you change to another one, if they reject your article and you have to go to another one, we can do that automatically, and it's done for you. So definitely something very, very important to learn. And then we get to the writing itself, which of course is absolutely, it's brutal. It's brutal because you are exposing yourself, and I can't tell you how often I've walked away and like, yes, I nailed it. I think it's great. Then I go out and I bike or I run or do something, and I come back and I start reading it, and I'm like, what the? And it's just, then it's awful, right? I find, but that's a process where it's a very, or you send it to somebody and you're so proud of it and they just hammer it, right? And you realize, oh my God, there are all these things I didn't think of. So you have to be very thick-skinned. You have to learn, and that's another reason why you want to work with your prospective advisor, is to get that experience figuring out whether this is going to work or not. So the title is kind of where the whole thing starts. And surprisingly to me, sometimes I feel people are not putting enough effort and thought into the title. The title has to, what I say, introduce the reader to the given narrative. It has to introduce the players. And the players, what I mean by players, are all the key elements in whatever story you are trying to tell. If you're working with certain organisms, those names have to be in the title. If it has to do with whatever the key terms are that are critical for your story, it should be in the title. The title, and this is, this is probably a good time to mention this. We're not writing a crime novel here. So we're not waiting until the very end to let them know who stole the bicycle, right? That's not the purpose here. It should be told very upfront. The title should essentially be a summary. It should already give you away what this story is all about. Why they should read this. It cannot, so on one hand it has to provide the story, but it cannot be overly long and complicated, and this is where it's very difficult to wordsmith a good title, okay? It could even be posed as a question, which I've heard one time there was actually a meta-analysis of people who looked at the impact factor of journals and the citations of titles that involved a question or not. And I think there were more citations if it included a question mark in the title. And this is probably because it's more engaging. It is like you are inviting the reader into sharing something. There's some doubt here. There's an opening. So the reader is being invited into your world. So it's more embracing, more inviting. And it will very likely be required to change multiple times as you go along. So you start out, you have a working title, and then it changes. Okay, that's very likely gonna happen. So this is something I published. So at the time, Heather was an undergrad, Delaney was an undergraduate, Purushottam was a PhD student in my program at the time. So we will come back to this a little bit later, but you can see here, can insects assess environmental risk? What? Wait, that's kind of interesting, right? So I'll come back to about this story, because, but this is the kind of title that can be used to entice people, that can take, even when you have bad data, you can get away with it, okay? Which this is an example of, okay? This was me. Really, this is one of my most creative efforts. It's taking something and creating something out of nothing, essentially. A way to think of the process of writing is thinking of funnels, starting out broad, going in, and then expanding out. So first we go from wide to narrow, and then at some point we expand and we go the other way. So we first start out very broadly, and then we narrow in, and then if it was a primary research article, so in the discussion we would broaden out and provide the broader perspectives. So we start out as we talk about whatever we are talking about. So what is the challenge? Is this related to climate change? Has this to do with pesticide resistance or urbanization, or anxiety among animals, or what is the bigger picture here? What is the problem that we are, what is the broader context that this story falls within? Then we want to introduce the species, the analysis, the systems. So we sort of, within this context, what are the systems, what are the key species? We want to introduce those. We can then introduce paradigms and hypotheses. Okay? Now we'll come back to that here on the next slide. And we can then also, initially we can, if there are key terms that we think the reader needs to get introduced to, this is where we want to do this. So think of the initial introduction, the initial part of your mini review or of your review article here as you're introducing the reader to what is important for him or her or them to appreciate this story. What are the key elements? That is what the introduction serves as a way to guide the reader and the person's subconscious towards what is to be expected as the person reads through this document. We're not trying to surprise the reader. Very important. We're trying to constantly set ourselves up and logically flow into something that they expect. So if the first paragraph is clear, they will not be surprised when they read the second paragraph, and there's a nice bridge to the second paragraph. So it flows. We are not trying to surprise them here, right? So this bullet here about paradigms and hypotheses, very, very important. So what do I mean by that? What is a paradigm? What is a theory? What are we thinking about here? Any thoughts? Have you heard that term paradigm before? Yeah? No? Yeah?
Probably like the assumptions of the field and what assumptions the reader needs to going into the paper in order to properly understand what you're trying to say.
Okay. Yeah, that's very important. So a paradigm or a theory is something that is widely accepted. It's a broader concept that under which we have made some assumptions, but this is basically some tectonic plate theory that the tectonic plates have moved apart, and this is why we have species that look similar, and this is why the continents are. We don't have the proof of that. Somebody could come in and come up with a new explanation for how the continents were created. But that's a pretty strong one, right? So that would be a paradigm. So I'll give you some examples here, but in a little bit. But why this is so important to think about bigger paradigms, bigger theories, is because this allows, if we tie it into something bigger, it makes the paper or the article we're writing, it makes it relevant to a broader audience. It's not just people working with otters or eels or camels. It can be something that cuts across a lot of organisms. So by introducing these wider paradigms or theories, we really have an opportunity to make it relevant to a lot of audiences. That means that journals are going to be very interested in, because if your paper is about the hind leg on a spider mite, okay, there's not a lot of people working on the hind leg of spider mites. So why would I read this? We have to make it more compelling, more relevant, have broader relevance. So how do we do that? Well, we can do that by introducing a paradigm. So this could be like natal preference hypothesis, or the preference performance hypothesis, or island biography theory, or RNK selection theory. These are all theories and paradigms that are well known, studied in the evolutionary, in the ecological literature, in the molecular world. I'm sure they have their own theories and paradigms as well. So using those as part of the framework you use to construct your narrative is super, super important. It really helps you. It gives you a lot of references that you can pull in, and it therefore gives you an opportunity to make it much easier for you to write, because you've got a lot of information that you can pull in. You just have to process it and make it logic and flow properly in your narrative. And then afterwards, once you have done that, you then start broadening out. So what was actually from that extraction of information, from introducing those paradigms that were relevant, from introducing those species and systems and whatnot. What have we actually learned? What have the researchers working on this, what have they found out? So what is the body of knowledge? Can we use some of that to make some predictions? Based on what you have just synthesized, can I make some predictions? What is the broader relevance of this, and what is still unknown? And you can almost think of these, so there were about 4 or 5 bullets on the last slide, and now 4 or 5. These could be sections these could be the 5 or 10 sections that you want in your mini review, right? And what are the future needs? So this is also a great idea. So you have just spent a whole bunch of time reviewing the literature in this area, and you have, at the end, you end up with a list of what are the future research needs. Well, this is why this could be your literature review for your thesis, because that's exactly what chapter 1 then starts by. You start, chapter 1 is then addressing one of those research needs that you've just identified in your literature review. So this was published as a mini review. So your committee, of course, are going to accept it. There's no need for them to even argue with something that has already been published. You're now setting up and justifying why you're doing the experiments that you're doing. So you can see how this can really help you in your graduate program efforts. And in this process, I want to make sure that it's very important to think that and this is where we all differ. We can use different tools. We're all different in the way we work. Some people are very visual. There are definitely ways that you can think of as you're constructing your narrative. You can buy some colored sticky notes, and you can use blue for species and yellow for systems or analysis, and you can use colors for different things. You can sort of try to use those colors to put them up on a whiteboard. You can also, if you have access to a whiteboard, you can use that to your advantage. Try to put it up, make it visual, combine them, start out with a whole bunch and then try to combine them. You can do lots of things in ways that you are, so this is as part of making it flow the right way, finding out the sequence you want for your sections, what the sections need to be about. You can definitely think of sticky notes or something in PowerPoint, or so it could be something electronic, doesn't need to be physical, but sometimes using something, a pen and paper, is actually very, very good. It's a process that really inspires many people, including myself. So this could be something you can use in the process of creating that narrative. So you have the idea, and this is sort of a way of illustrating it as a little cartoon, right? You had the original idea that leads to you formulating some questions. That's a process that can go back and forth. You can sort of reiterate, you can go back. You can sort of spin that a couple of times. You can talk with people. Is that really the case, or is this really the question, or what's going on here? So that can go back and forth a couple of times. Then you start digging into the literature and figuring out what that is. Well, you may start writing, or as you are writing and finding more literature, you may actually go back here. So this is just, it's a process that can go around. There's a lot of feedback, and this is where it takes time, and this is a process. When we say it's hard, it's this part that is hard. Going back and forth and like, I got to start all over. This is actually not the way I want to do it. I need to go back to the drawing board and instead, I want to start here. So the real question is actually this. So my title now also needs to change. Well, that means that, okay, so we need these other species to be part of it, because I just found all this literature about dolphins that I hadn't thought of. I had never heard of this. So now I'm going to put that in there, and then we have to start all over, right? But that's welcome to the world of writing. That's part of this. And you learn a ton in the process. You are strengthening your writing muscles. You are becoming stronger and stronger. You're getting better and better and more and more analytical, more and more critical of your own writing, and it's going to get better and better. The more work you put into this, the earlier you start, the more you're willing to, the better you're going to get. And the more convincing you're going to come across as a communicator. And graduate professors, supervisors of graduate students are going to look at you with different eyes if you are able to dominate this process. If you are able to be successful here, this will really help you out. So back to that dubious article that I published so this was actually, to give you the background, this was data that we tried to collect multiple times, and it was just a very standard insecticide trial where we exposed some insects to pesticides, and we wanted to show whether they died or not. The problem was they didn't die. So this was there was very little mortality. It was just not good data, but we tried over and over. The pesticides we were using were biopesticides. They were organically certified, not heavy. They were not killing anything, okay? So we had to come up with something else. So instead, I came up with this. So in the 1970s, where it was common that you just published a bioassay where we took some insect, we put them in a petri dish, we exposed them to this chemical, and this is how many died. You could get away with that. You can't get away with that today, okay? This is just not interesting enough. So I had to call it something else. So I call it environmental risk assessment. So I started out. So even though this is pesticides, this is lichens, I started out in natural habitats. There is strong evolutionary selection pressure on herbivorous insects to avoid danger and choose suitable host plants. Similar, selection pressures may drive movement and choices of overposition hosts by herbivorous insects living in agricultural cropping systems. So I'm basically just saying, because we know that there are these evolutionary, so I'm taking the paradigm of evolution of natural selection, I'm using that as a framework to make my case here, okay? This is why this is no longer a study about lichens. It's actually a study about movement and assessment of risk. So we can actually talk about birds, we can talk about primates, we can, or vertebrates, we can talk about all sorts of animals and make it relevant to this case. And that makes it much more interesting, much more relevant. Somebody who, if I had written this as a straight up, or we had written this as a straight up pesticide trial, those people we would never be able to draw in that audience, right? So this is how you package your narrative. You come up with a narrative that in some way is compelling by using a framework, a paradigm, a theory in a way that makes it more broadly relevant. And then I want to go back to that mini review by Katrina. So this was back in 2014. Well, where is Katrina today? She was a student in my class when I was at Perth, and she did a very good job on a lab report that we did, where we did some spider mite studies. So you guys have done these studies. So choice studies with spider mites and bean plants. That's exactly what we did. She wrote a very, very nice report. So I tapped Katrina on the shoulder and I said, should we try to publish something together here? Would you be interested in that? And she said yes. So this was published as a mini review on smart use of fertilizer. So the idea here was this idea I had that we could think of preventive medicine. We could think of spider mites being a huge problem across many. So these are small, tiny mites that cause a lot of damage in greenhouses and in row crops and even in orchards, especially if the crop is not receiving enough water. So drought stress will very likely lead to spider mite outbreaks in crops. Well, it turns out that fertilizer is kind of the same way. So I was like, that's kind of like preventive medicine and our health. If we are not taking care of ourselves, if we are not getting enough exercise, if we are not eating well, if we're not sleeping enough, and if we are, whatever, consuming things that are not good for us, we fall ill. So maybe we could think of smart use of fertilizer as a way to, and by the way, spider mites have developed resistance to virtually almost all pesticides out there available to us. So we don't have those at our disposal as much as we had in the past. So we don't have many alternatives. Can we in some way prevent them from becoming a problem in the first place? So that's what this story became a story about, is can we take the concept of preventive medicine and use it in agriculture by optimizing fertilizer and therefore making the crop healthy, and then it will be able to resist and protect itself from spider mites. Then we don't need to use pesticides. Everybody wins, right? So this thing we wrote is just under 2,000 words. 2,000 words. It's 30 references. It's 6 sections, okay? So how long is that going to take you to write some? Now, this is also published in the it's not a prestigious journal, right? Plant Science Today is a very low impact factor. It doesn't matter, guys. Once it gets out there, it's a peer-reviewed journal. Once it gets out there, you are now an author. You are now an author, okay? Which is completely different from all the others who are not. So it may not be the best journal, but it's still a journal. So you're now setting yourself aside. So so I looked up Katrina last night on Google Scholar. So she now has publications she went on and did wonderful things in her career. She was actually applying for vet school at the time. So this was very helpful. And she told me afterwards that this was a key for her to get into vet school. And okay, so it was published in 2000. It's only referenced, but 17. I mean, it's not crazy good. It's still okay. I think it's pretty good. Okay? So this thing is in Google Scholar. It is a record. People can see it. So prospective supervisors or people who are giving out awards or scholarships, they can look her up. She's there. Okay? That could be you right there. That could be you right there. Okay? So what did we do in this article? So let's look at the paragraphs as they are. So I'm just screen shooting sort of the first paragraph so you can get an idea of that funnel idea that I was talking about. So the way we start out, fertilizers are utilized to increase agricultural and horticultural productivity through improved crop growth. So we're basically starting out fertilizer. So there's going to be a whole bunch of references talking about how fertilizers are important, right? That's clear, yeah? Then we were going to introduce the species. So then we have a section that talks about spider mites. So many species of mites cause severe blah, blah, blah. So there's a whole bunch of references on why spider mites are very, very important. There are some references about them developing resistance to miticides. So this is the fertilizer, the big picture. Then we got the mites, part of the big picture. These mites are huge. We're sort of setting the stage for this. We're addressing something that is very important, costing a lot of money, so we can introduce some economics on how many millions of dollars they are costing each year on different continents, in different crops, whatnot. And then we can talk about crop fertilization and host plant resistance. So there are actually some papers here in other species, but also in mites, talking about how fertilizer can be used to boost plant resistance, kind of like our own health. Like we can eat well to stay healthy. Well, so can plants. So if we can keep plants healthy as part of our nursing, our agricultural system, whether that's in a greenhouse, a forest, row crop, orchard, wherever it is, whatever the crop is, there are reasons, there are references out there supporting the fact that that can actually boost the plant's ability to defend itself in multiple ways. It can become, so this can be density of trichomes, it can be the thickness of the cuticles so that they can't get to the leaves as easily. It can be the amount of inducible defense compounds that they produce so they become more toxic. It can be the way that the plants can recruit natural enemies to make them to have biological, so natural enemies can come in and eat the pests like spider mites. So recruitment of predatory mites or other organisms that can feed on the mites. So lots here to add to this. And we can also talk about host plant selection. So there's actually also some studies showing that not only can we make the plants more resistant, there are also a lot of studies showing that spider mites don't feed randomly, that they actually prefer certain plants over others. So if we can tie this to these two together, so maybe they don't prefer healthy plants. They just don't like them because they know it's not as beneficial for them to spend spend time and resources on feeding on those plants, right? And we can talk about predatory mites, so they can actually also be, so this is part of the recruitment of this. And then concluding remarks, and that's it. 2,000 words, 5-6 paragraphs, 30 references, boom, done. You could be doing that. In wherever field you're working on, you could take something like this, come up with a plan for, say, 5-10 sections, write them, make a plan, write them up, and work with somebody. You could do it by yourself, or you could work with somebody, or maybe go together and publish this. And yeah, it's completely doable. As part of this, and this is something newer, more recent. Any of you heard of BioRender? Okay, so this is a program. So this is another thing. So you need to citation management software, and you need to start get a subscription of on a journal. Another thing you need a subscription on is BioRender. Okay, BioRender is this tool. So Patrice in my lab is very clever with this. Okay. So this is what's called a visual abstract. So this was published in one of his recent articles. What do you think a visual abstract is? Any thoughts? What's a visual abstract? That's a hand, right? That's a hand there.
Yeah, the visual abstract would be an abstract that is visualized.
Yeah.
So in a way that the viewers can understand what's actually happening in a summarized form.
Beautiful, right? So you can see, so there's some cold plasma being produced, there's some plants, there's some element compositions. We got the spider mites here somewhere, I believe. There they are, the small spider mites. We got trichomes, we got some hyperspectral imaging, we got it all going here. See, this is another thing, this is a way to sexify your mini review, is by adding a visual abstract to it, right? Make it look slick, make it look clever. So if you are not the best drawer on the planet, which most of us are not, you can use BioRender to create something. And this is also where you can look in published articles and see how people are using BioRender or something equivalent to develop something that can visually explain the story and that can be very compelling. Journals love that. It's not just your writing, it's also the presentation of your work. If you add a visual abstract, that's clever. And if you're interested in grad school and you're good at this, you can help out the postdocs and the PI and others. So this is also a way you can make yourself very invaluable. Okay? So think about this as another thing you need to learn, another tool you need to learn. So definitely add that. So let's talk about the language here for a little bit. The language. And I would strongly encourage you, if you're early in your career, and whether English is your first language or second or third, it doesn't really matter. Find some articles that for whatever reason you like the language. You just, for some reason, it flows. It just appeals to you. It can be so you're reading all these articles and this one, there's just something about it, I really like it. I really like the way it's written. And you try to figure out what it is about it, and then you adopt that language. That's not plagiarism. That is not plagiarism. Taking somebody else, it's kind of like if you're playing an instrument and you kind of like Joe Bonamassa or something, and you're using his style or his riff or something, or a drummer or something. It's not plagiarism to be inspired. You're being inspired by this. You should definitely allow yourself to be inspired. Use the existing body of literature not only to learn, to acquire knowledge about the topic, but also about how they present, how they write. So pick a couple of them and use them as templates, and think if you have a screen. So think about, you have their article over here and you have yours here, and you can so they start out this way, so I need to start out this way. They write it this way, so I can write it this way. That's not plagiarism. That's just helping yourself. Okay? And it makes it very, very much easier to get started on the writing itself. Make sure to be consistent about terminology. Don't call the same thing 12 different things within a document. Stick with it. This is where we are all about diversity and inclusiveness, but not when it comes to terminology in scientific writing. In scientific writing, we stick with it, okay? Try to use the terms that are relevant to that area. Avoid stating the obvious. You don't want to come across as condescending and say, so it's a balance here, I understand, because you just saw we started out talking about fertilizer being important to agriculture. Well, we kind of know that. We've known that for a long time. So it's a balance here, and there's no black and white. But avoiding stating the obvious can come across as very off-putting. Avoid the long and complex sentences. Be short. Be concise. Okay. Don't try to make it all dramatic and sort of indirect sentences and then another sentence, and just make short, concise sentences. Make it easy, simple. And there's definitely language and there are different terms that you should be using. And follow, try to be as logic and have it flow in a particular way. The length of sentences. Look at how things are summarized, how results are being presented in other papers. Look at other mini reviews. Look at how people did it. Pick up on how they did it from a technical standpoint. It doesn't matter what the topic is. Just look at how they did it. Break it down. How did they cite? How do you use references the right way? Which things should be, what topics, what terms should be supported by references? Right? And there are certain words that we use when we write that we, at least us for whom English is not the first language, I would never say moreover or subsequently when I talk with people, but I write it all the time. Right? So there are terms that you write that you would never use in normal speaking. There are also words that we use on a daily basis that we would never write in a scientific article. Really, like. These are words that you hear people say all the time. You never see the word huge in a research article, right? They're just words you don't see. So avoid using those. There's no point in bringing them in and off-put an editor somewhere, right? So pay attention to language in those articles that you like, that you use as template. Figure out what seems to work, how they are phrasing things. And the transitions between your paragraphs need to be very clear. If the flow is very well crafted, then you can also easily transition from one to the next. And that's super important, okay? That it's not very abrupt. And again, we don't want any surprises along the way. Balance between specificity and broader relevance. As much as you want to be specific, think about you're also trying to cater to a broader audience. You want this not to be just about people who work with bees or pollination. Is there a bigger picture here? Could this be, how could I make this relevant to somebody who works with crocodiles or something? Or who, I mean, that's a fair question, okay? Is there a way I could make this more broadly relevant? You should really think about that. Not just about making it very, very specific. Use of visuals like the visual abstracts and the references. So I want to give you a couple of examples of, so this is actually, so I also of course do a lot of editing like most other professors do. So this is something that was handed to me as part of a manuscript. So this was about genetically modified, so BT corn, so genetically modified corn. And the results, so, okay, here we go. I just need an oxygen tank here. So these results demonstrate that the lethal effects of the Cry1AB protein are similar in all 4 of the Diatrea species used in the study, enabling us to consider the potential of B. thuringiensis as an effective alternative for managing these pest species. One sentence, right? 42 words, okay? Clearly, we can do better than this, right? So there's a couple of things here that stand out. So I have sort of developed an allergy against the word the, because oftentimes I don't think it's necessary at all. And there are quite a few of them. So there's singular and plural versions of this. So there's like 8 of them right here, or 7, right? Where we probably don't need them. So those and a couple of other wordsmithing tricks. So we are at 42 words. I just did a little bit of editing and turned it into study results showed similar and strong mortality responses to Cry1AB protein by all 4 Diatrea species. Full stop. Findings support the notion that Cry1AB protein can be used effectively to manage all 4 pest species. I have lost no information whatsoever, and now I'm down to 32 words. I just chopped it by 21%, okay? And I got 2 sentences. So now we don't lose any readers. We're not getting sued by somebody who ran out of oxygen, right? And we have we can just ask ChatGPT, okay? Now ChatGPT actually did a fabulous work, I feel. So the lethal effects of Cry1AB protein are consistent across all 4 Diatrea species in the study, supporting B. thuringiensis as a viable alternative for pest management. Now we're down to 26 words, okay? So, and let me be very, very clear here. I think ChatGPT is wonderful, and I don't think we are cheating in any shape or form by taking our own language, putting it into ChatGPT and say, hey, can you help me switch? We can take this directly, or we could maybe wordsmith it a little bit more. This is not ChatGPT actually writing this for us. This is us using a tool that is available, just like spell checking, right? It's the same thing essentially, just a little bit more advanced. But this is a way we who don't speak English, or us, even if we speak English as our first language, we are just not perfect in our scientific language, we can use this tool to our advantage. And we can come up with something that is very, very compelling. So when I say 2,000 words or 3,000 words, it's also, that means that the value of each word is actually quite significant. So the fewer words you have, the more you invest in every single word, right? But this is also a way to overcome some of those some of that intimidation you may have about writing, that, well, am I good at this? Well, run it through ChatGPT and see if they can come up with something better. Or then you walk back and then you add something to it and you do it again. You can go back and forth and ultimately you end up with something that probably you can be very proud of, okay? And you learn a lot in the process. You can analyze what ChatGPT did, and then the next time you propose something, you're probably going to take advantage of this, okay? What happened to all the theirs here? Huh? Not a lot of them. There were 7 of them. Now we're down to 2, right? Yeah. So this is something that can really help you, I feel. Here's an example of an introduction. Very, very typical. See, and if you start what I just told you about the funnel, have a look at it from a mechanical standpoint, right? So, found mostly in wild, in tropical and subtropical regions, parrots are birds of the order blah, 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 and comprise roughly these species. We start out with the broad. We're talking about parrots. This is about an article about how people are developing an internet for parrots, that parrots can FaceTime each other, okay? They're training parrots to use an iPad and ring a bell when they want to call another parrot, and then they can pick on an iPad and say who they want to call, okay? So they had 18 parrots. The 3 of them got scared about this, but they ended up with 15 parrots, and they allowed them to talk with each other. So parrot number 2 would be talking with parrot number 7, and they would actively call one another, okay? This is a way to overcome an issue about isolation of parrots, that because they can't bring them together because of diseases and because of logistics of being far away. So they're developing a FaceTime for parrots, okay? Yep.
That implies that they can recognize other parrots. And
absolutely. They would be calling for that reason.
Okay.
Yeah. Crazy stuff, okay? So, but this is one of those things that if you've listened to Science Friday or you follow the literature, this is the kind of stuff you pick up and then you go, damn, this is interesting. Can I write something about that? Okay? Anyway, back to this. So we start our broad. Most species are highly social and live. So they immediately bring social, because it has to do with social aspects of parrots. That's what they bring in immediately. They talk about how important it is for parrots to hang out. They're in groups and they like to talk with one another. And so you can see how, and this is about how many. So there are all these parrots, 21 million that are in captivity, and so you can see it follows this logic that I was talking about, right? And they beautifully put references in where it's needed, okay? So to finish up here, writing, it's a very long, it's a grueling process. Many drafts will be necessary. You have to be thick-skinned for sure. It's like going on a diet. You have to, or play an instrument. You got to be dedicated. You got to stick with it, but develop a plan, and then also reward yourself along the way. If you are sticking to the plan, come up with a reward system where yes, I got to the 2,000 word mark. Okay, buy yourself something nice. Okay, be generous with yourself. It's very important that you reward yourself and seek inputs from others. Be open, bring them in. And you will get stuck multiple times, but this is where you can try ChatGPT, you can look for more literature, you can talk with somebody, and you can bring in graduate prospective advisors and whatnot in the process, okay? And remember why you're doing this, that there's a bigger goal, that this is really is time worth investing. You will learn a lot in the process, and it will really benefit your career, okay? So, run, sweat. For me, the thing is to get distracted. I need to sweat, so I bike or I run or something, right? Other people maybe need to sing or draw or go cooking or something. But it's essentially write something, go and get yourself distracted, read it, and then rewrite. And keep doing this until you feel comfortable to sharing it with someone, right? And then you just go back and then you keep going, and you're going to come out on the other side so much stronger and with a publication under your belt. So with that, if you have any questions, let me know what you think you've taken away from this. That would actually be very appreciative. I would like to hear what from what I shared with you, what was the most meaningful? Yeah?
I would definitely say that you've made it sound incredibly doable and not
Great.
like something that we should be intimidated by in any form or respect.
Beautiful. Oh, thank you. That's kind of why I'm here. I'm like, why are we not doing this more? Why taking classes is, that's important. But man, there's so much more here. There's so much going on here, and there's so many smart people sitting around. You could engage more with them, and you are one of them. It's not like all the others are the smart ones. You are here, you're smart, okay? Just own that and let it grow, okay? Try to let it grow, really. I mean it, okay? Yeah? Quinn?
Another thing I do for ChatGPT is not for reverse my sentence, but also I will send that draft to them.
Yeah.
They can rate my article up. Like he will say, I will grade like 7 out of 10, and then it will list me advantage and disadvantage part of my draft.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a tool. I think people are overreacting to their resistance to this when word processing. It's as long as we don't say write me a 5,000 word article with all the references, right? As long as we're not doing that, that is very not where we want to go, right? But we can certainly use it for sure. Absolutely. Other comments? Yeah.
I'd like to say thank you for your talk, and also, now that I have a paper, what are my next steps on how to publish?
So when you have it, when the manuscript is there and ready, you send it. So there's a whole submission process that I haven't talked about. But if you go to the author guidelines of the journal, you will see. So you basically upload the manuscript, and then they'll go. Depending on the journal, it will take some time before you hear back. And there'll be a review process. They will say they will reject it right off the bat, or they will say you need to do some revisions. So accept it with minor revisions or accept it with major revisions. So you can go through that process. And there's ways to deal with that. So I would encourage you maybe not the first time to go completely by yourself, but go with somebody who has done this before, right? And I will say this, if you are interested, I don't care what topic you're working on, I would gladly work with you. If you have something that you want to work on, if you have something, please come and take my email and we can have coffee and we can talk about it. So this is definitely something that I will gladly work with you on.
Yeah. So can I add one more thing? It's like for the journal stuff, since we are undergrad, so there's some undergrad journal and they can give us more detailed information. Like Berkeley have like an undergrad journal and it's due on March 31.
Yeah.
You can connect with them and then give them draft and they can give some suggestions.
There are also writing services available to you as a student here. You have writing. I get from what I hear, they're giving great feedback. So that's definitely something taken advantage of. You had your hand up as well, yeah?
Following up her question,
Yeah.
As undergraduate students, I know that in this field, like Nature, Science, and Sales are like 3 big journals, but we are undergraduates, so what is the way we can identify like the journal that is fit to us?
Very good question. And so what journal to pick? Well, as you start doing the Google Scholar Literature search in the beginning, you can actually look at so you can start so you're importing your articles into your citation management software, and you will see which journals, if say 60% or 50% of the papers that you're pulling are all from the same journal. That would be a good place to start, right? So you can use your references as a way, and I hate to say this, but this is the truth. They would love to publish something where you are also publishing their references, because they would love something, because this will increase their impact factor. If they publish your paper and you have referenced some of their papers, it shouldn't matter, but it kind of does, okay? So that's another way of, if a majority of your references are within 1 or 2 journals, that's where I would start. Yeah? Good. If not, thank you so much for, you have a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Another question, just a comment.
Yeah.
That the practical examples you gave were very helpful, both in like how to figure out how to iterate on a question and just developing it. And also at the start, the fact that you gave examples where even like primary schoolers were, as long as they had like an in to have someone, or it doesn't even technically require an in to have someone else to work with your research on, but as long as you're working on research, you can submit something. So
absolutely.
Those were good examples to have.
Great. Well, thank you so much for you guys being here today, and